Hello and welcome to Byjus Exam Prep IAS. Very warm good morning to everyone. I hope all of you are doing good. This is Sunday, a day that usually people take off from their classes. But as a UPSC aspirants, I know that you can't afford even a single day off. And neither can we. This is why we are here once again at 10 a.m. just like we do every single day to analyze the most important news stories from the Hindu newspaper. We'll be taking up the news stories from both the prelims as well as the mains examination point of view. Also, once again, reminding you, if you want to have one-on-one counseling session with our experts without any attached cost to it, there's a Google form link in the description of the video. Fill up that form, give us the details, and our experts will get in touch with you about any issue that you're facing in your preparation journey. Now, these are topics that we have taken up for today's discussion. The first topic is about the Supreme Court's interim order on the Forest Act. Now, as you know, the Forest Act in India was originally introduced in 1980. The purpose was to safeguard the forest to make sure that the government agencies don't divert the forest to some other uses. There have been multiple changes in that act. Recent change was done by the government last year, 2023. Now there have been people in the Supreme Court against the change that the government introduced in the act last year. So in short, we'll be discussing what this act is all about, what were the changes, amendments introduced by the government, and what exactly did the Supreme Court say in its order. Second article is about the Global South stand on Israel in the International Court of Justice. Now, this is an ongoing issue. As you know, multiple countries have gone to the International Court of Justice against Israel's attack in the Gaza territory. Countries such as South Africa, Brazil have spoken up openly against Israel. We'll be discussing the status of that case in the International Court of Justice, stand of the Global South, India's stand specifically, and what challenges does it present to India's diplomacy. Then from the prelims examination point of view, the Prime Minister recently appreciated the role played by cooperatives in the farmers' development in India. He talked about the fact that the farmers get most of their credit from cooperative societies other than from the banks. So cooperative societies have been playing an important role and they need to be encouraged even further. We'll be discussing the concept of these cooperative societies in India. Then Ladakh, that has been demanding inclusion in the 6th schedule. As you know, many leaders from Ladakh had said that they will go on a hunger strike if their demands are not accepted. The central government has finally said that we will look into this demand. Although they have not accepted it, but they have just given them an assurance that you don't have to go for a hunger strike. We will look into that. So we will also look into what are the demands, what are they expecting, what is the benefit that they derive out of being in the 6th schedule as compared to otherwise. Next article is about what Kerala is doing to curb antimicrobial resistance. Antimicrobial resistance, or AMR, is a topic that we continuously discuss every few days. It's a problem that we have in India where people take a lot of antibiotics and their body gets, and the microbes in your body get used to the antibiotics, and that is why when you actually require them, they don't work on your body because your microbes or germs in your body are already used to the action of antibiotics that develops resistance against that. We'll be discussing what Kerala is doing to curb that menace. The last article will be about how UAE has been removed from FATF grey list. Now, this might come as a surprise for a lot of people. Usually when you talk about the FATF grey list, you associate poor countries with that list. But a country like UAE also was in this list, but it has been removed now. What are the implications for India specifically and the UAE? This is what we will be discussing. So, a lot of important articles. Let's start with the first one. The first article is about the Forest Right Act. Now, a bit of very basic background detail about what this law is. So, in 1980, the government of India introduced something called the Forest Conservation Act. The idea was very simple. We needed to ensure that our forest, the forest cover in the country, is conserved because increasingly a lot of forests were diverted for some other usage. A lot of people were using forests for different purposes. For example, forests were cut down to set up big manufacturing plants. Forests were cut down to set up other kinds of infrastructure projects for housing, for mineral mining, etc. So the idea was to stop that from happening, to make a law that specifically says that forests cannot be used for any other purpose. Now, for a country, ideally, the target for forest cover is about 33%. A country, in order to have a sustainable living, in order to have a sustainable environment, usually aims to achieve the target of 33% roundabout. India is not near that target, and that is why we have also been making efforts to conserve our forest. Now, the problem here was, in this law, when it was originally introduced in 1980, there were some loopholes here and there, and we'll discuss what those loopholes were. So in 1980, the law said any piece of forest land recognized as such by the Act or by the states in their records since 1980 will be conserved. Now, every government law is just a matter of wordplay. What words are being used, you have to look at that very carefully. So the original law said those forests which are recognized as forests by the states, they will be conserved. Means, if there is a piece of land that has a lot of trees, very dense trees cover, but it is not recognized as a forest by the state, then it will not be conserved. So for conservation, it is essential that it has to be recognized by the states in their record. Now, this is a big loophole, because a lot of times the states did not recognize some areas as forest. Although those areas had a lot of trees, they had dense cover, they had all the characteristics of forest, but just because the states wanted to cut them in the future, they made sure that they don't recognize them as forest. So it was a big loophole that the states did not recognize them. So the Supreme Court recognized this problem. Thus, the Supreme Court in 1996 changed a fraction of this law. Supreme Court said forests had to be protected irrespective of how they were classified or who owned them. So even if there is an area owned by an individual that is forest or has characteristics of the forest, that also has to be protected. You can't just depend on the states to recognize a piece of area as forest to conserve them. Any area owned by anyone that is a forest, that has to be conserved. Now, this is where a new concept started. Now, this concept is important for you because this is at the entire gist of this controversy. The concept of deemed forest began. This started the concept of deemed forest. Now, what are deemed forests? Deemed forests are forest-like areas. Areas that have all the characteristics of a forest: trees, dense cover, diverse vegetation, there are diverse biodiversity in that area, but they have not been recognized as forest as such. In the government revenue record, they are not called as forest, but they have all the characteristics of the forest. They will be called as a deemed forest. Supreme Court said that everything that looks like a forest has to be protected, doesn't matter the states recognize it or not. States did not like it, because understand this from the government's point of view. Doesn't matter which government you're talking about, central government or state government, at the end of the day, for their long-term development, they need infrastructure building. For infrastructure building, they need areas. So every state, willingly or unwillingly, has to cut down the forest cover. When the demand of population increases, when population increases, you have to make more houses. When the demand for electricity increases, you have to make more dams. When the demand for job increases, you have to make more factories. So at the end of the day, every government wants more land so that they can build up the infrastructure. This is where the governments now, specifically the state governments, started to give their own definition of forest. This is where the problem started. So states had their own definition of forest. Some states said that we will recognize forest in some other way. Some states said for us forest is something else. I'll give you an example here. Before that, there is some important data. As you can see, a lot of forest land over the decades has been diverted. If you can see here, from 1980 to 2020, 40 years, 35% of the forest land that has been diverted has gone for mining, means for to take out minerals. Again, it's a very tough decision any government has to make, whether you conserve the environment or you go towards your economic growth for creation of jobs. Also, from 1950 to 1980, most of the forest diverted was for agriculture purposes. And there is a very sharp change in how the forest diversion happened after 1980. Also, look at the forest cover. The forest cover in India, as I said, is way below the target that we want to achieve. Also, the amendments made in the law, the government expects that with this the forest cover will increase to 28%. The government expects that we will be able to make a much stronger case for conserving of the forest. Anyways, let's go back. So the problem was, we started with 1980 law. In 1980, the law was passed that any forest considered as a forest by the state government should be protected. Supreme Court came up in 1996. They said no. Anything that looks like a forest, like a deemed forest, owned by anyone, government or individual, has to be protected. Then the states now started giving different definition of deemed forest. What can be called as a deemed forest? Chhattisgarh and Madhya Pradesh have a different definition. According to them, forest is an area that has about 10 hectares of land covered with naturally growing timber, fuel wood and yielding trees. They also talk about density of at least 200 trees or more per hectare. Goa, on the other hand, has a different definition. Goa says forest is a patch of land having at least 75% covered with forest species. So again, different states have different parameters. The government of India thus last year in 2023 amended the law. The 2023 amendment introduced many things. One of the things that the government amended was there should be a clear-cut definition of forest for the entire country. Clear-cut definition of forest. We can't have different states giving different idea of what is a deemed forest, what is not a deemed forest. How would a deemed forest be recognized to be protected? That has to be an India-wide definition. For that, the government introduced some amendments in 2023. Apart from that, the amendments also gave some exceptions. Exception in the sense, the government also said what are the forests that can be cut down. What are the forests that do not get this protection? The simple idea is any forest or any piece of land that is important for national security purposes, that would not get any protection. For example, forest land within 100 kilometers along the international borders, line of control, line of actual control, LOC, LAC, can be cleaned up to construct projects. So no protection given to them. Secondly, any 10 hectares in the forest which are regarded necessary for constructing security infrastructure, or 5 hectares of area in forest land which is affected by left-wing extremism, also can be cleared out. So again, the 2023 amendment, that is the amendment done last year in the law, number 1, it gave one single definition of forest. Number 2, it also gave exceptions to some forest areas, means it told that some forest areas can still be cut down. They will not be getting the same protection as others. This 2023 amendment was challenged in the Supreme Court. So I hope now you are clear with the chronology of the events. Again, the chronology is 1980, the law got introduced or the law got passed. 1996, Supreme Court changed slightly. Supreme Court changed it by saying that even the deemed forest should be covered. Means areas that look like forest should be covered. So what happened? Because of this, states had different definitions of forest. State gave different definitions of what are deemed forest. Because of these different definitions, the Government of India 2023 amended the law. The amendments were number 1, one single definition of forest, and number 2, some exceptions were given. Now this amendment was challenged in the Supreme Court. So now the Supreme Court interim order has come in. Supreme Court order on amendments has come in. What has the Supreme Court said in the order? Again, it's an interim order, it's not a final order. Supreme Court says, till the time we decide, are the amendments logical, constitutional or not, till the time we decide or we take a call on the amendments that were done by the government, let's assume that the amendments don't exist. Supreme Court said, right now, let's run the country, let's run the law, imagining that the recent amendments don't exist. It also struck down a government scheme that talked about setting up zoos and safari parks on forest land. The Supreme Court said even that should not be done. Again, this is an interim order. Interim order is usually when the Supreme Court gives an order before the final order, so that before you wait or till the time that you wait for the final order, they will tell you what to do, at least for now. So till the final order comes in, this is the status. Don't consider any of these amendments. Now, let's go beyond this. There are two sides of the coin, obviously. There are some very positive impacts of this amendment or considered to be positive. What are those? First, one clear definition of forest, so we can have an entire country following same kind of a law. It will help us in increasing our forest cover. It will help us in making sure that we achieve our target. See, the government of India's target of achieving net zero by 2070, it has a lot of components. In the net zero target, one of the components is to give a push to renewable energy, solar, wind, nuclear, etc. One other target is to ensure that we have a big carbon sink. Carbon sink means these dense forest cover that allows us to reduce the amount of carbon in the atmosphere. For that to actually be successful, we have to make sure we have enough forest cover available. And this is something that the government is trying to achieve by this. That it also contains provisions for development, because as I said, there are some exceptions given. One other exception is 0.1 hectare of area nearby the railway tracks will also not be covered under protection. So that either side of the railway track, 0.1 hectare of area can also be cut down. It also gives enough scope for prioritizing national security. As we just saw, areas near the border can be cut down. It also talks about compensatory afforestation. Now, compensatory afforestation is a very old concept. The idea is, let's assume you want to open up a big factory. You go to the government, ask for land. The government gives you the land. In that land, there were 50,000 trees. So you have to cut down those trees. But before doing that, you have to promise to the government that you will plant 50,000 or more trees somewhere else to compensate. And you will also give some money, deposit some money in a fund called CAMPA. In fact, this brings me to your homework for today. The first homework that you have for today, which you have to tell me in the comment section, tell me where are these funds used? Where are these funds used, the CAMPA funds? And second, who gets these funds? Does the state government get these funds or the center government gets these funds? So again, CAMPA funds, the fund in which the people will or the companies will deposit money if they have taken up land, if they have done some deforestation. You have to tell these funds or the money coming in is used where exactly, and secondly, who gets most of these funds, center government or the state government. The bill also empowers, or the amendments empower the local communities as well by setting up zoos, safaris, ecotourism, because this will bring in more jobs, this will bring in more people, concept of Airbnb, etc. People getting or converting their houses into guest houses, etc. will also come into picture. These are the benefits, but again, the final call has to be taken by the Supreme Court of India. Interim order says don't consider these amendments so far, but let's see what the final order comes in. This was our first article for the day. The second article for the day is from international relations. It's the ongoing issue of Israel and the allegations of Israel committing genocide in Gaza. As you know, this is a case going on in the International Court of Justice. Now, a couple of very important things here. First, we had heard earlier as well, countries such as South Africa have spoken up openly against Israel. They have even appealed in the International Court of Justice that a case should go on. But please understand, the present case going on in the International Court of Justice, the present case that is going on is not about the current Israel attack on Gaza. The current Israel attack on Gaza, which came after the Hamas attack, as you know, Hamas militants attacked Israel 7th of October, took a lot of people hostage, kidnapped them as well. Israel retaliated. Since then, it has been carrying out strikes in Gaza. This is not the current issue in International Court of Justice, please remember that. The current issue is even earlier as compared to what happened in Hamas and Israel. But because it's on similar kind of issue, Israel trying to occupy more territory from Palestinian areas, this topic has again come back into light. The issue here in the International Court of Justice is Israel committing genocide by killing thousands of people in Gaza? Or do they have the right to defend themselves? Now, there are two different views here given by most countries around the world. Right now, the issue has divided the world into two parts. One part, Global South. The first part is the Global South. Now, Global South is mostly the developing nations. The Global South of the developing nations seem to be in favor of, or seem to be against Israel rather. They seem to be against Israel. Most of them favor a ceasefire. Most of them say that Israel is committing a genocide. On the other hand, the global north or the developed nations, they are in favor of Israel's right to defend itself. They say whatever Israel is doing is justified because it is defending itself. Now the problem here is, what does India do? India is kind of stuck in between. If you look at what experts are saying, this is by far the most important challenge faced by Indian diplomacy in the past few years. Understand where India stands right now. If you say India is in an easy position, that is not true. On one hand, you have seen the Prime Minister talking continuously about the Global South. India trying very hard to position itself as a leader of the Global South. We want to establish ourselves as a leader of the developing world. We want to put forward the points that the developing world is facing. In the G20 also, we talked a lot about the Global South. On the other hand, Israel is one of our closest friends now. So what stand does India take? On top of that, amongst those countries that are against Israel are also the countries in the Middle East or West Asia as you call them. UAE, Qatar. This is also where India is stuck. As you know, Qatar recently took the decision to pardon a retired Navy personnel. The Navy personnel, most of them came back to India after they were pardoned by Qatar. This was followed by a surprise visit from Indian Prime Minister to Qatar. So Indian Prime Minister went to Qatar recently. Again, it was an unplanned visit. The Indian Prime Minister was also in the UAE, as you know, that to inaugurate that temple. So again, India is torn between these two sides. On one hand, we are increasingly collaborating with Israel on multiple things. We buy a lot of defense weapons from Israel. We buy a lot of other technology from Israel. Not just this. When Israel said that they are facing shortage of workers, shortage of laborers after the attack, India said that we will send a lot of workers, and India is sending thousands of construction workers to Israel. We have multiple defense ventures, Israeli companies working with the Indian companies. So now where does India go forward from here? On one hand, we have been able to ensure that in most of these diplomatic issues, we have been able to play both sides. Be it the Ukraine-Russia issue, we have been able to play both sides. Now, here also, we have to now tread our path very carefully. But is India in a position to really claim the leadership of the Global South at a time when most of the Global South has a stand that India does not support? That is what the big challenge is. As I said, the International Court of Justice hearing that is going on is before this Israel-Hamas conflict actually started. These proceedings that are going on had started in December 2022. It was more of an advisory opinion that the General Assembly had asked for. As you know, the International Court of Justice also has advisory opinion. The UN principal organs and the UN agencies can ask for advice on law-related matters from the court. The UN General Assembly had asked their opinion on Israel's occupation of the areas occupied by Palestine, the Palestinian territories, and what should be done. Although this case has been going on since 2022, now a new chapter in discussion has been added because of the Israel-Hamas conflict. Now, whenever these kind of issues start in the court, usually what is the procedure? So when these issues begin in the court, when the hearings are done against one or two countries, the court will ask all the member countries, do you want to submit your views? Any country is free to submit their view in the court on the ongoing matter so that the court can take all of that into consideration. Brazil and South Africa have spoken up openly against Israel. They have given their views, submitted their views, criticizing Israel, demanding an immediate ceasefire. Most of the Western countries, on the other hand, have also submitted their views, saying that they are in favor of Israel's right to defend. What happened on October 7 is unacceptable, and Israel has every right to defend itself. India is somewhere in the middle because we have not submitted our views. India took a backseat in this case. We have not submitted these views. Now, the interesting part also is with respect to Brazil and South Africa. Now, please see, Brazil and South Africa might not be our biggest trading partners, but both these countries are important in terms of India's demands at the global stage. Talk about G4, talk about BRICS. G4, as you know, is India, Germany, Japan and Brazil. 4 countries together demanding reforms in the UN Security Council. Demands that will only be accepted if most of the developed world is in favor, because they are the ones who hold most of the power in the P5. So with Brazil here taking a different tune, India is rethinking its strategy of how to go forward. Same is the case here. In BRICS also there is Brazil, there is South Africa. If these two take a view which is divergent as compared to India on the Israel situation, it becomes difficult for us to collaborate on these global issues. This is why India's diplomacy right now is in a slight, I won't say spot of bother, but it's in a very interesting situation which needs to be seen. Where do we go ahead from now? In fact, Brazil and Israel have openly criticized each other on this issue, so much so that Brazil has even recalled its ambassador from Israel. The Brazilian president, in fact, said that what Israel is doing in Gaza is very similar to the Holocaust, what Hitler had done to Jews by killing 6 million Jewish people. Obviously, Israel did not take it lightly, and that has resulted in straining their diplomatic relationship as well. India treading a very, very, very narrow path here, trying to see if we can balance on both the sides. On one hand, trying to ensure that we stand with the global south, and on the other hand, also making sure that we are not seen as someone who is only in favor of Israel. We have had close defense ties with Israel. As you know, we are collaborating on a lot of different things with Israel. Defense, technology such as water desalination, technology such as waste to energy generation, all of this is India-Israel focus. For example, we have been buying defense equipment from Israel, especially the drones. Also the drones made by Adani, Elbit Advanced Systems, which is a joint collaboration, private sector companies. They are making drones in Hyderabad. They have sent their drones to Israel also to help with their ongoing operations. In middle of all of this is also one more very interesting detail that you should know. Despite India's closeness with Israel and despite Israel demanding the same, India has still not designated Hamas as a terrorist organization. Please do remember that. India has still not recognized Hamas as a has not designated Hamas as a terrorist organization. Israel has been asking India to do this, but India has not done this so far. Now, please understand, these decisions might seem small, but if a country does not take this decision of we have not recognized an organization as a terrorist organization, it's not because we forgot. Please understand, all these things are a part of diplomacy. All these things are a part of decision making at the very highest level. Every country wants to play to its own national interest, every single step. So if we have not recognized Hamas as a terrorist organization so far, there has to be a thinking behind that as well. Also, I want to discuss the idea of global south and global north, because this is so much in the news. In the past year or so, you keep on seeing Prime Minister speaking about the global south, the need for the global south to stay together, how India can be the leader of the global south. Now, where does this term originate? The origin of this term goes back to 1980s, proposed by Willy Brandt, where he said that the world can be divided into two parts. mostly the northern hemisphere, and not all, but mostly the northern hemisphere, and countries such as Australia, Singapore, etc., New Zealand, they would be the global north, means the more developed, the more advanced, the richer countries. The global south would be the countries which are in the southern hemisphere mostly. Thus, do remember this line, the imaginary line that divides the global north with the global south, is called as the Brandt line. Do remember this. It's an important fact for you. This imaginary line is the Brandt line. Again, not all the countries of southern hemisphere are the global south. Australia, Singapore, as you can see here. That is why mostly and not all. So do remember all these keywords here. This imaginary line shows the difference in development parameters between northern and the southern hemisphere. This is a term that you will see being used in the UN as well. This is a term that you will see being used by Indian Prime Minister also very, very often now these days. Also, there have been multiple attempts that the government of India has been taking to establish its position as a leader of the global south. If not the only leader, then at least as a main player in the global south community. For example, New Delhi Declaration. India used this in G20 to talk a lot about the global south issues, because issues that pertain to developing world somehow take a back seat at the global affairs. No country is interested, at least the rich countries are not interested in listening to the poor countries. Issues such as debt financing, climate justice, gender equality, we discussed all of that in G20 as the host country. We made sure the voice of the poor nations is heard. We also focused on inclusion of African Union, which was a big step in G20. It was again an indication that India's global clout is increasing. It was again an indication that India's support to the global south remains extremely firm. We have also been very, very strong in our vaccine Maitri. If you remember, when India started producing COVID-19 vaccines, India started exporting it to many countries. And there were many people who were criticizing the government of India. The argument was that let's first give every Indian 2 doses and only then we should export. But the government of India started export of vaccines to many countries even before our entire population was covered. For example, look at Bangladesh. Most of the vaccines that Bangladesh got were from India. In fact, India's largest export of vaccine of COVID-19 went to Bangladesh. This pays rich dividends in the future. At that point of time, it might look like a decision that might impact us negatively, but these are all long decisions or long-term decisions which have an impact later on. And this is a decision that made sure that India's position in the global south becomes even more firm. Then India has also been making sure that we take more countries along with us at the global forum, be it the WTO, be it the UN, be it the non-aligned movement. Wherever possible, we try and ensure bigger participation and representation of the developing world. And we talk about climate justice. We have been speaking openly about the fact that you can't put the responsibility only on the global south or on the developing world to cut down their emissions. They are still at the growing stage. You can't expect them to slow down their economic development for the crimes that the rich nations committed in the past. When the smaller countries say these things, rich countries don't even listen. But when such an argument comes in from a country such as India, of India's stature, that has a much better impact. And that's what India has been using at the global stage. These are the 2 articles from the mains examination point of view. Now let's move on to see some news stories from the prelims examination point of view, which are equally important, especially important because the prelims are just right around the corner. First, the Prime Minister spoke openly and applauded the role of the cooperatives in farmers' welfare. Now, cooperatives have always been at the forefront of India's rural development, India's agricultural development, especially in the field of agriculture. If you look at the farmers, all the problems that they face, out of those, one of the biggest problems that farmers always face is the access to credit. In simple terms, access to loan. Most of the farmers don't have their own saving to invest money. to buy seeds, to buy fertilizer, to pay to the laborers, etc. So they need to have some input capital to begin with. When they go to the banks usually don't recognize those requests. They ask for a lot of paperwork, a lot of documentation. The government does have schemes such as the Kisan credit card scheme, etc. But again, many of these are not translated on the ground. So that is why the government has set up multiple ways in which farmers can actually take loans and get money. One of these, which plays an extremely important role, is called the PACS. PACS or PACS, it stands for Primary Agricultural Credit Societies. Primary Agricultural Credit Societies. Now, those who have trouble understanding what are they, where do they stand, let me first show you a table so that you can understand. I'll come back to this. Let's see this table. This table will make it very easy for you to understand how do farmers get loan or where do the farmers go for loan. So this is a table that shows you cooperative credit institutions. So cooperative institutions that give loan to the banks. There are rural and then there are urban. We are focusing on the rural one. Amongst the rural cooperatives, we have short-term loans and long-term loans. In the short-term loan category, we have options such as the state cooperative banks. They give you short-term loans. Central cooperative banks. And the third is this PACS. Primary Agricultural Credit Society. So this is where they stand. So if you are asked the simple definition of what defines primary agricultural credit societies, these are institutions to give loan or credit to the farmers, which is short term to medium term in the rural area. So they are again in the rural category also short to medium term. This is where they stand. Not in the urban, not in the long term. Do remember this. So this is what their importance is. Now, what happened? The occasion of the Prime Minister giving a speech was that the world's largest grain storage is being unveiled. It is being supported by 11 primary agriculture credit societies in 11 states. Prime Minister said that 500 more of these societies will be set up across the entire country to ensure that farmers have their hands on credit immediately whenever they want it. Also, he said that there is a project underway. The government is trying to computerize 18,000 PACS across the entire country because they work in an area where they have to maintain their accounts. They have to keep a track of the money going in and going out and coming in. So all of that will be computerized in the long run. Also, the government says there are over 25,000 cooperative units in the fishery sector as well. Now, as you know, the government of India has been focusing a lot to push the farmers not away from farming but diversify. The government does not want the farmers to just focus on and grow grains. They want them to go towards horticulture, produce vegetables, produce fruits, produce cash crops, or make sure that they are into fishery and dairy, because these are the things that can be exported at a very, very good value. This adds value to our GDP also. This adds value to the economic growth and to the farmers as well. Now the PACS as an institution, again they work at the village level and they are usually the last link in the 3-tier cooperative credit structure. Please understand, they work at the rural level and they provide short-term and medium-term loans. This is not a new institution. Before you assume that this is something that started recently, in fact, it goes as old as in 1904. So it's a British era legacy. It's a British era legacy. And this is one of those experiments on the British era, thankfully, which have been giving us rich dividends even today. As per the RBI report, we have a total of over 1 lakh PACS across the entire country. And about 47,000 of them, so lump sum 47%, were in profit. So not all of them are in profit. But again, there are some things that the government has to give a push to, even though they are not in profit, but they are actually filling in a very critical void in providing loan, in providing credit to the farmers wherever they require them the most. These are some of the important aspects of PACS. They give easy access to farmers and make them a part of the official financial infrastructure. Because when you get a loan, then most of your records have to be maintained properly. You keep a proper record. You come and become a part of the government system. The government can keep a track of you. If the government, for example, I'll give you a very simple example. When the government announces that we will deposit 5,000 rupees or 500 or 1,000 rupees in the account of the farmers. Now, how do they know what account does the farmer own? Or how do they know which account is used by the farmers? So when some farmers take loan from the banks or these institutions and they give their account details there, that is an important way for the government to then recognize these farmers that, okay, this bank account is owned by a farmer, so this is where we can transfer the money. Because otherwise, how do you expect the government to know which account is owned by the farmer, where to transfer money, where not to transfer money? This becomes a big challenge. Also, it provides convenient services and promotes the saving culture as well, because you have to give the money back. The better your repaying history is, the better are the conditions for the next loan. So the farmers also know if they have to come back to take the loan again, to take the credit again, they have to maintain a good repaying history, just like the credit score that we all maintain. It also enhances the discipline in the farmers, that makes them focus much more on profitability, that makes them focus much more on efficient utilization of the funds that they get from these. The next article that we have is from Ladakh. We have discussed this earlier as well. Ever since Ladakh was separated from Jammu Kashmir, made into a union territory, Ladakh has been demanding a couple of things. First, they have been demanding that we should all be called a state. Second thing that they have been demanding is we want to be included in the 6th schedule of the Indian Constitution. Now, I really hope all of you by now have remembered the 12 schedules. If you have not done that, please do that today itself. Very important topic, very easy to remember, many tricks available online. Please do remember the 12 schedules of the Constitution. Every alternate year, you will see a question in the prelims examination related to the 12 schedules. So out of these 12 schedules, we have schedule number 6, which has 4 states from the northeast part of the country: Assam, Tripura, Meghalaya, Mizoram. These are the states in the northeast part of the country with a significant tribal population. They have been given certain safeguards. Safeguards to preserve their own culture, to preserve their distinct identity. Some rights to make the laws on some local matters. Ladakh wants exactly the same. Ladakh has been demanding that we also have a distinct, diverse culture of our own. We don't want any outside interference. So please also allow us to be a part of the 6th schedule. The government of India has been listening to these demands for a long time. They have not accepted it because, see, think of it from the government's point of view. When you accept any demand made for inclusion in a particular schedule, or demand to make a separate state, or any such demand, the moment you accept this, you are sending out a signal to others as well that, okay, we are ready to accept whatever demand you want. And thus the governments usually take a long time and see whether the movement will continue, whether people will keep demanding for a long time. If it does, only then the government usually accepts this. So now what is happening in Ladakh? Ladakh, as you know, has 2 districts. There are only 2 districts in entire Ladakh, that is Leh and there is Kargil. Interesting part is, when Ladakh was first created, Jammu Kashmir was separated, Kargil had demanded, or people in Kargil demanded, that they wanted to be a part of Jammu Kashmir. They don't recognize themselves as being similar to Ladakh. But the government did not listen to them. But now the demand that is being made is a collective demand. It's not just Ladakh, or not just Leh. Leh and Kargil, both of them are together making it. So there are 2 agencies, 2 bodies that have been formed. One, Leh Apex Body, LAB. And second is KDA, Kargil Democratic Alliance. Kargil Democratic Alliance, KDA. Both of these have been demanding the same. Multiple leaders from Ladakh, multiple well-known people, had said that they will go on a hunger fast if the government does not accept their demands. This is where the union government has now agreed that, okay, we will listen to it. Again, the government has not agreed to the demand. The government has agreed, okay, we will listen to it, don't worry. We will consider this, we'll talk to constitutional experts, we'll see what can be done, is it possible, is it a long-term solution or not. The 6th schedule comes under Article 244, and as I said earlier, it allows the tribal population to have their own laws, their own customs, their own traditions can be preserved here. Ladakh, apart from this, has also been demanding a statehood for themselves, local job reservation for the locals, and not just this, they have also been demanding parliamentary seat each for Leh and Kargil. Now, if you look at Ladakh's population, majority of it is tribal, so they do qualify in that sense. The total population as per 2011 census, at the last available census that we have, of Ladakh was 2.74 lakh. We have seen a lot of protests erupting from different parts of Ladakh on this issue for a long time. Now, if you look at the sixth schedule, as I said, has 4 states. But please understand this. One state doesn't mean only one area under it. For example, if this is, let's say this is Assam. Again, my drawing is bad, so this is not real Assam. But let's say this is Assam. Now, if in Assam, let's say this is the area where there is tribal population. Then there's one more area with another group of tribals. Then one more area with another group of tribals. So all of these will have different cultures, different demands. So it's not that all of them will have the same district that will be formed. No. For each of them, a separate district council will be created. So Assam, for example, has North Kachar Hills district, Karbi Anglong district, and the Borderland Territorial Area district. So this way, 6th schedule has a total of 10 districts. 4 states, but if you look inside the state, there are 10 districts. This is now your second homework of the day. Your second homework of the day that you have to tell me in the chat, and I do read all the chat and your comments. The second homework is, tell me amongst these 10 districts, one of them has been given more powers as compared to others and has more members also as compared to others. Which one? The question is, amongst these 10 districts, one of them has more members as compared to the others, that has even more powers as compared to the others. Tell me which one, which is that district, and maybe you can read a bit of background about it. It will be very interesting for you to actually know this. Now, what are the advantages? Why is it that the Ladakh wants so badly to be a part of the 6th schedule? So they get a lot of advantages, mainly to preserve their own culture. There are some local issues in which they can make their own laws. For example, there is some power of legislative, judiciary, administrative that is given within them. Not just this, they also get extra funds. It's all about the money. So, Finance Commission also recommends grant in aid for the 6 schedule areas. They also get right to make their own laws on issues such as land, forest, fisheries, etc. And they can also have their own social economic development process expedited by making their own policies. Now, I would not say that the 6 schedule areas that already are present have made a immense change or have made immense development in these districts. But at least it does give them the authority to have their own local government. Because what happens in these areas is you have your own kind of a local government. Like the people living in that area will vote for the members of their district. They have the right to pass laws. Their laws will also go to the governor. The governor will sign on it. So again, this is very similar to having your own local government, a city government kind of a thing. And again, everyone wants more powers to be given to them. They want to be governed themselves. The next article from Kerala. Again, I told you last Sunday also, if you remember, that on Sundays usually there are 2 or 3 very interesting things that happen in the Hindu newspaper. They don't really have an editorial section on Sundays, but what they do is they do a state-wise feature. They tell you some very interesting, important news from specific states. So last Sunday, if you remember, we talked about Tamil Nadu, what Tamil Nadu specifically has been doing in renewable energy sector. This Sunday, this time around, we have taken up the case of Kerala. What is Kerala doing and why is it in the news? Why do we have to study about it? Now, India faces a big problem. And it's not just India, countries around the world face a big problem, which is called antimicrobial resistance. We have discussed about this multiple times. The simple idea is, when you consume too many antibiotics, when your body does not need it, the microbes in your body get used to these antibiotics and they develop resistance against it. So when you actually need it, when you actually want this to have a positive impact on your body, it will not work. Because the germs in your body have already gotten used to it, they have developed resistance against it. That's the simple idea. Why do we have this problem in India? Because India is one of the few countries where you can go to a medical store and ask for whatever medicine you want, no questions asked. They will not even ask you, has a doctor prescribed to you? The only thing they will ask you, do you have money? As long as you have the money to buy a medicine, an injection, any drug in India, you will be able to buy that. That means in India, popping up an antibiotic is a very common task. And this is a very dangerous trend. I've said this earlier as well, I'll say this again. When we fall ill in India, going to the doctor is usually the last option available. The first option is in each and every one of our houses, we have a medicine box, that white transparent kind of a box where we have unfinished medicines from the last doctor visit. We pop up one of those thinking antibiotic is the cure for everything. Second option is we call one of our friends or family members, ask them what did they eat when they had fever. So we'll do the same thing. Funniest of it is the third one. The funniest of it is you ask them, what are you suffering from? They'll say, I have viral fever. And then you ask them, what are you doing about it? They'll say, I'm taking an antibiotic. Do you see the irony here? Viral fever. The word itself tells you it is caused by virus and not bacteria. And you are taking what to cure it? You are taking antibiotic. What does antibiotic do? Antibiotic kills bacteria. Despite whatever you think, these are not the same things. Virus and bacteria are two very different things. So if you have a disease caused by virus and you're taking a medicine that cures bacteria and you're hoping that it will clear the infection, that is not going to happen. That's a simple idea. So what happens here is we are consuming too many antibiotics that are easily available in the market. The government realizes this problem. So what the government did in 2011, way back in 2011, they introduced the H1 rule. The H1 rule was simple. Any antibiotic cannot be sold over the counter. So there are some medicines which are called over the counter, OTC. Over the counter means those medicines that you should be able to buy without any doctor prescription. For example, you go to a medicine shop and you ask them for a bandage. They won't ask you, have the doctor prescribed to you? No, you have a cut. You go and buy a band-aid, that's over the counter. You go and buy, let's say, sanitizer, Dettol, Savlon, etc. All these are over the counter. Celadon, Disprin for a headache, that's also over the counter. So over the counter medicines are freely available anywhere in the world. But antibiotics should not be freely available. And they are not in most parts of the world. But in India, they are. So Government of India made a rule in 2011, H1 rule, that antibiotics should only be sold if the doctor has written on the record. The medical store guy should keep a record, should write the name of the doctor. Only give these many medicines as the doctor has prescribed. I'll tell you one more very interesting problem here. A problem that exists in nowhere else in the world. Doctor would have asked you to eat 2 tablets for 3 days, right? So in total you require to eat how many? 6 tablets, right? Simple. Now you go to the medical shop, ask them for the tablet. He will say, no, I have a strip of 10 tablets. I will not cut the strip. So you take the entire strip. So for 6 tablets, you have taken the entire strip of 10. Means even if you complete your course, 4 tablets are left. So the next time you fall ill, you will say, oh, let me eat that medicine only. Doesn't matter. I got fine the last time. I'll be fine this time around also. This is a very, very illogical practice. Doesn't happen anywhere in the world. You are only sold those many medicines as a doctor prescribed to you, but not in India. Because that's how we work. So H1 rule introduced by the government 2011 but never implemented. Because the medical store guys thought, oh, too much of an effort, we'll not do this. So what did the government say? Government said, okay, you have a problem, we will change the rules. So in 2013, government changed the rules. 2013, government said there are different orders of antibiotics. The first level of antibiotic should be available over the counter. They said first line antibiotic without prescription, fine. But second and third line should not be allowed. What happened? Nothing happened. It continues even today just like that. Even today you can get almost any antibiotic that you want, just have to pay for it. Now what has happened? Why is it in the news? Now finally, Kerala has said enough is enough. Now we are implementing the original rule of H1. Kerala has said now we have started an operation called antimicrobial resistant intervention for total health, under which original H1 rule has been implemented. So now in Kerala, you will not be able to buy any antibiotic without a doctor's prescription. That is why it is in the news. Again, this is the story. 2011, government said no antibiotic allowed without doctor prescription. 2013, they said, okay, first line allowed, second, third line not allowed. Kerala said enough is enough. We will not let you buy any medicine that is antibiotic without doctor's prescription. Now, the reason why Kerala is able to do that partially is because they have a very good doctor-patient ratio, so they have enough doctors. Even in villages, because in other parts of the country, the problem is you don't have enough doctors themselves. So how do the patient go there and get an antibiotic written? So again, doctors are well enough or they are good in number, even in villages. Also, literacy rate is very high. High literacy rate means people understand this problem. You don't have to put this in their mind, this is bad. People understand the issue and that is how they take these actions. There have been multiple studies that have suggested over 50% of the antibiotic prescriptions, even written by doctors, are unnecessary. So it's not always necessary that if the doctor has written you an antibiotic that you actually required it. It may never have been required, a doctor just wrote it to be safe. Because what happens is, to know whether or not antibiotic is required, you have to conduct some test. Now, when you ask the patient, go and conduct this test, what will the patient say? Oh, I am not spending any money. I gave 500 rupees to doctor. He should know everything. Now, doctor has taken 500 rupees from me. Now, he wants me to go to do one more test. Oh, very bad. I will not do that. That's the tendency that we have, because most of us anyways don't have a medical insurance. When you don't have medical insurance, you have to pay it from your own pocket. So this is where it becomes problematic. People just prefer spending from their own pocket. Don't prefer spending from their own pocket rather. And that's why people say, rather than me going for a test, let me just pop in the medicine that I have already in my medicine box and that would be good enough. That becomes problematic. So Kerala is trying to cut down that problem. They're also asking the hospitals to disclose if a patient got antimicrobial resistance through the hospitals. Spending more time in the hospital is also one of the ways in which you can acquire antimicrobial resistance. You are getting a lot of antibiotics administered through the hospitals. That is also something the Kerala government is keeping a look at. So again, not just the social indicators of Kerala are already better, they're also trying to make it even better and improve the lives of the people going ahead. Now, one more problem here, many people don't understand this. Why is this such a big deal? This is such a big deal because do you know development of a new antibiotic takes tens of years. It's not that, oh, antibiotic is not working, let me make a new one. That is not how it works. To develop a stronger antibiotic, you might require 10 and 20 years of research. There are people in the world right now on whom no antibiotic will work. There are people like that have developed resistance to every antibiotic in the world because they have consumed so many antibiotics. So there are governments that are pushing the entrepreneurs to make sure that they are able to develop new medicine, new antibiotic. But again, this is a very long process. The shorter solution will be ask the people not to eat antibiotics when they don't need to. This is a graphic from the WHO that tells you how antimicrobial resistance is caused. It can be caused by popping up the medicine when you don't require. It is also caused by consuming food. A lot of poultry products have antibiotics. Farmers gave them injections to increase their size. You buy them per kg, so you pay them a better price, and then you get antibiotics in your body just because you consume those animals. These are some of the things that the government has been doing on the national level in India. The H1 rule I told you about. We also have a red line campaign. Antibiotic medicines. There's a red line on those tablet capsule strips. You can't consume, you can't sell them without doctor's prescription. But again, the implementation has been extremely dodgy here. Government has banned the use of antibiotics in agriculture. We also have national program on the same. It's not an India-wide problem, it's a worldwide problem. At the world, at the global level as well, we have seen multiple steps taken against antimicrobial resistance. Do remember that it's a topic that is always important. It's a topic on which multiple questions have been asked in the past. I can't emphasize enough, so please do read about this. Don't skip it at all. The last article that we have here is UAE coming out of the FATF grey list. Interestingly, in India, When you talk about FATF grey list, the only country that comes to my mind is Pakistan. Tell me if I'm lying. The moment I tell you FATF grey list, the first reaction you have, oh yeah, Pakistan was onto it. But we don't realize there are other countries also that are in that list, some of the rich, powerful countries as well, including the UAE. So UAE for a couple of years was in the grey list because the FATF was of the view that there are a lot of money laundering, hedge fund activities that are going on in UAE. They are not able to control it. Now FATF has taken the decision to take UAE out of this list. So how does it serve India? It serves India because India-UAE trade relations are improving day by day. If you take a list of top 3 trading partners of India, so top 3, not in that order, it keeps on changing year on year, but top 3 usually are China, US and UAE. So 1, 2, 3 may keep on changing, but usually 1, 2, 3 are these. China, UAE and US, these are top 3 trading partners of India. A lot of investment comes into India from UAE, and not just this, the other way around as well. A lot of investment from India also goes to the UAE. Because of the FATF restrictions, because they were on the grey list, there were many restrictions here. The RBI also had said investments in NBFCs, non-banking financial companies, from FATF non-compliant jurisdiction, includes UAE as well, would not be treated at par with other jurisdictions. So there was a limit on how much money could come in from these countries to India. Countries from UAE or companies from UAE could not invest a lot of money here. Fresh investors were disallowed having voting power more than 20% threshold if the money used to come in from non-FATF compliant countries. So that was a stumbling block between India, UAE trade and investment. Now that has been removed. India-based funds, if you don't know this, watch Shark Tank. PE is private equity. P is private equity, V is venture capital. Private equity, venture capital, these are those funds that invest money in startups and different companies and organizations. These funds also want to invest in UAE from India were having trouble because there were some restrictions. Now that have also been removed. You might see an improved trade because again India UAE have already signed a free trade agreement, so that is again a shot in the arm for India that UAE has now come out of this FATF grey list. Also, before we go, FATF lists, you have read about this, especially with respect to Pakistan. As you know, FATF, Financial Action Task Force, it's an informal organization. The logic is to make sure that they curb black money, they curb issues such as money laundering. They have 2 lists, grey list and the black list. Grey list are those countries which are not compliant, but they are trying to be compliant. They are still missing out. Some money is going out of these countries to terror activities and not able to stop money laundering. On the other hand, blacklist are countries that are a gone case, as you call in informal language. Gone case, they are actively supporting terror. That is what you call as a blacklist. So blacklist again are NCCTs. Official name is non-cooperative countries or territories. These are only Iran, North Korea and Myanmar so far. Myanmar was added to the list only when the military or the junta overtook the country in 2021. Grey list are countries which usually come and go. Pakistan was in this list for a long time, was removed recently. Warning is given to these countries to improve in the future. This brings us to the end of today's session of the Hindu Newspaper. I hope you learned something new today. I hope you also remember there are 2 homeworks that you have to do and I will see your comments. Do tell me in the comment section. The first question was about the Campa funds. Who gets it? Where is it utilized? And the second question was about, what the second question was about? Yes, second question was about the territorial councils of the 6th schedule, which is the one that has the highest number of members, which is the one that has the highest amount of power. Thank you so much for joining in. Do join us tomorrow as well to learn important news stories from the Hindu newspaper in about an hour or so. Thank you so much. Have a good day ahead. Bye-bye. Jai Hind.